The corridor outside the maternity ward smelled of antiseptic and boiled water, the kind of neutral scent that was supposed to calm nerves but often did the opposite. Nurses moved with practiced speed, their shoes whispering against the polished floor, while families hovered near doors, clutching flowers and balloons, waiting for news that would change their lives. In the middle of this fragile calm stood a woman whose sharp heels clicked like a warning. The mother-in-law had arrived with a storm already brewing in her chest, her lips pressed thin, her eyes scanning the hallway as if she owned it. She did not come with congratulations or tenderness. She came with an order. Her daughter-in-law, pale and exhausted after hours of labor, lay inside the room holding her newborn, overwhelmed by a mix of pain, relief, and love so fierce it made her chest ache. She expected kindness, or at least silence. Instead, the door flew open and the older woman's voice cut through the room like a blade. Accusations poured out, about shame, about family honor, about how this child was a mistake, how the young woman had ruined everything. The nurses froze for a moment, unsure whether to intervene. The new mother tried to sit up, her arms instinctively tightening around the baby, her heart pounding as fear replaced the joy she had just begun to feel. "You don't belong here," the mother-in-law snapped, her voice rising. "Get out. Take your things and leave." Each word landed heavier than the last, echoing against the sterile walls. The daughter-in-law felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. She had imagined many versions of this day, but none where she would be cast out of a hospital room, still bleeding, still trembling, with a newborn pressed to her chest. Tears welled in her eyes, not only from humiliation, but from the sudden realization that the family she had married into might never accept her or her child. As the argument escalated, passers-by slowed, drawn by the tension. A nurse gently tried to de-escalate the situation, reminding the older woman of hospital rules, of compassion, of the fragility of the moment. But the mother-in-law waved her off, fueled by years of resentment and control. She spoke of abandonment, of wrong choices, of trains missed and stations passed, sneering that the younger woman had rushed to the wrong destination in life. The words were cruel, calculated to wound. Then, just as the daughter-in-law felt herself breaking, footsteps approached from the hallway. They were unhurried, confident, and they carried a presence that instantly shifted the air in the room. A man appeared in the doorway, unexpected, calm, and unmistakably authoritative. He was someone the mother-in-law had not anticipated, someone whose opinion carried weight she could not dismiss. The room fell silent as he spoke her name, not loudly, but firmly. The effect was immediate. The older woman's mouth opened, ready to fire back, but no sound came out. She stood there, suddenly small, suddenly unsure. The guest did not raise his voice. He did not insult or threaten. He simply spoke the truth, laying it out with quiet precision. He reminded her that this was not her moment, not her child, not her body. He spoke of boundaries, of decency, of the damage words could do when spoken at the wrong time. He looked at the daughter-in-law with compassion and then at the baby with unmistakable pride. In that instant, the balance of power shifted. The mother-in-law, so confident moments before, found herself speechless, confronted with a reality she could no longer control. Outside the hospital, in a completely different world of bright lights and television cameras, another confrontation was unfolding, one that would soon make headlines. Jennifer Aniston sat on the familiar set of the Today Show, poised and professional, ready to promote her latest project. The conversation began lightly, with laughter and anecdotes, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tone changed. Gayle King, known for her direct questions, steered the discussion toward topics Jennifer had carefully avoided for years: her personal life, her past relationships, the narratives the media refused to let die. At first, Jennifer smiled politely, answering with practiced grace. But as the questions became more pointed, the smile tightened. There was a sense that the interview had crossed an invisible line, that what was meant to be a conversation had turned into an interrogation. The studio audience felt it, the crew felt it, and Jennifer herself felt the familiar frustration rise. For decades, she had been reduced to headlines about heartbreak, as if her career, her talent, and her choices were secondary to old stories that no longer defined her. Gayle pressed on, perhaps unaware of how deeply the questions cut, perhaps believing that honesty demanded discomfort. But there is a difference between honesty and intrusion, and Jennifer had reached her limit. Her answers grew shorter, her posture stiffer. Finally, she took a breath, set her microphone down, and spoke with a calm that carried unmistakable finality. She explained that she was there to talk about her work, not to relive personal chapters she had long since closed. When the questions continued, she stood up. The moment was electric. Cameras followed as Jennifer thanked the hosts, wished everyone well, and walked off the set. There was no shouting, no dramatic outburst, just a clear boundary drawn in real time. Social media erupted within minutes, opinions dividing sharply. Some accused her of being overly sensitive, while others applauded her for refusing to be boxed into a narrative she did not choose. In that simple act of walking away, she reclaimed control of her story. In both situations, the hospital room and the television studio, the underlying theme was the same. It was about power, about who gets to define another person's life, and about the courage it takes to say no. The daughter-in-law, shielded by the sudden arrival of an ally, was given the space to breathe, to hold her child without fear. Jennifer Aniston, by standing up and leaving, reminded the world that even in the most public of spaces, personal boundaries matter. Life often places people at crossroads, at metaphorical stations where choices must be made. Some rush forward, believing they know best for everyone else. Others are pushed, criticized, or judged for the paths they choose. But sometimes, a single moment, a sudden guest, a quiet refusal, a walk toward the exit, changes everything. It silences those who believe they have the right to control others and gives strength to those who are learning, often painfully, to stand their ground. The maternity ward was meant to be a place of beginnings, where pain slowly gave way to hope and fear transformed into fragile happiness. Soft lights glowed above the corridor, and the steady beeping of monitors blended with hushed voices and distant footsteps. For most families, this was where memories were born. For one young woman, however, it became the stage for a humiliation she would never forget. Her mother-in-law arrived without warmth, without flowers, and without any intention of celebrating the child who had just come into the world. From the moment she stepped through the door, her presence felt heavy, as though she had brought an old grudge with her and intended to finally release it. The daughter-in-law lay weak in her bed, her body aching, her mind still drifting between exhaustion and disbelief. She held her newborn close, marveling at the tiny fingers curled against her chest, when the door opened sharply. The older woman's face was rigid, her eyes cold. There was no greeting, no glance at the baby. Instead, her words came fast and harsh, accusing the young mother of ruining the family name, of trapping her son, of making choices she had no right to make. The room seemed to shrink as the accusations piled up, each sentence heavier than the last. "Leave," the mother-in-law finally said, her voice rising with authority she believed was unquestionable. "You have no place here." The daughter-in-law's hands trembled as she tightened her hold on the child, instinctively shielding the baby from the hostility in the air. Nurses exchanged worried looks, unsure whether to intervene or wait for the situation to resolve itself. The young woman's eyes filled with tears, not only from shock, but from the realization that she was being rejected at her most vulnerable moment. The older woman continued, her words sharp and theatrical. She spoke of abandonment, of how the young woman had boarded the wrong train in life, rushed to the wrong station, and dragged everyone else along with her. Each metaphor was meant to humiliate, to remind her of her perceived inferiority. People in the hallways slowed their steps, drawn by the tension. The hospital, usually a place of quiet compassion, felt suddenly exposed and cruel. Just as the daughter-in-law's strength threatened to give way, a calm voice cut through the noise. A man stood in the doorway, someone the mother-in-law had not expected and could not easily dismiss. His presence alone was enough to shift the atmosphere. He did not shout or argue. He simply asked what was happening, his tone steady, his gaze unwavering. The older woman turned toward him, prepared to defend herself, but something in his expression stopped her. For the first time since she arrived, she hesitated. He spoke deliberately, reminding her that this was a hospital, that this woman had just given birth, and that cruelty had no place here. He spoke of respect, of consequences, and of the damage inflicted by words spoken without restraint. The mother-in-law's confident posture faltered. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no response. In that silence, the power she thought she held slipped away. Nurses stepped forward, gently but firmly guiding her out, while the daughter-in-law exhaled a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Far away from that hospital room, under the bright lights of a television studio, another woman found herself confronting a different kind of pressure. Jennifer Aniston sat across from Gayle King on the Today Show, cameras rolling, smiles in place. The interview began as expected, light and friendly, touching on Jennifer's latest work in her long, successful career. She answered with ease, her professionalism honed by years in the public eye. Yet beneath the surface, there was an awareness that interviews like this often carried hidden traps. As the conversation progressed, the questions subtly shifted. They drifted away from her current projects and toward her personal life, toward old relationships and narratives that had followed her for decades. Jennifer responded politely at first, offering careful, measured answers. But the persistence of the questions began to weigh on her. There was a sense that no matter how much she achieved, she was still expected to explain herself, to justify her choices, to relive moments she had long since processed in private. Gayle pressed further, perhaps believing the audience deserved raw honesty, perhaps unaware of how deeply these topics had already been mined by the media. The studio grew tense. Jennifer's smile faded, replaced by a calm seriousness. She spoke about boundaries, about how certain stories no longer belonged to public consumption. When the questions did not ease, she paused, took a breath, and made a decision that surprised everyone watching. With composed clarity, Jennifer explained that she was there to discuss her work, not to reopen personal wounds for the sake of headlines. She thanked the hosts and the audience, stood up, and walked off the set. There was no anger in her movement, only resolve. The cameras captured the moment, and within minutes, it spread across social media, igniting debates and drawing lines between those who saw her action as dramatic and those who saw it as necessary. In both the hospital and the studio, the situations were different, but the core struggle was the same. It was about control, about who gets to define another person's narrative. The mother-in-law believed she had the authority to judge and exile. The television interview pushed the idea that a public figure owed endless access to her private life. In each case, that assumption was challenged. One by the arrival of an unexpected ally, the other by a woman choosing to leave rather than comply. The daughter-in-law, cradling her child in the quiet that followed, felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but so was a new awareness of her own worth. Jennifer Aniston, walking away from the cameras, sent a message far beyond the studio walls. Sometimes, the most powerful response is not confrontation, but refusal. Not shouting, but silence. Not staying and enduring, but standing up and leaving. Life is full of moments where people are told they are in the wrong place, on the wrong path, headed toward the wrong station. But those moments also offer a choice. To accept the judgment, or to step away and claim one's own direction. In these stories, that choice made all the difference.